I remember the biting cold, the kind that digs into your bones even through layers of good hiking gear. I'd taken a risk, a shortcut marked on an old, unofficial map I'd bought from a grizzled vendor in Interlaken. He'd winked, something about finding what you're looking for, and I'd laughed it off, chalking it up to local color. Now, laughter felt like a distant, foreign concept. A sudden, unexpected rock slide had sent me tumbling, my ankle screaming in protest as I slammed against unforgiving granite. Hours, maybe days, I couldn't tell. I'd crawled, limped, and dragged myself through an endless, gray-shrouded valley. The fog was a constant, suffocating shroud, muffling sound, blurring vision. Just when I thought the cold, the pain, and the gnawing hunger would finally claim me, I saw it. A town. It wasn't on any map I'd ever seen, certainly not the official ones. Nestled in a deep, forgotten hollow, it emerged from the mist like a charcoal drawing, all sharp angles and dark wood. The buildings were ancient, timbered structures, their roofs steep and gabled, like illustrations from a forgotten fairy tale. No smoke rose from chimneys, no lights flickered in windows. Yet there was a stillness that wasn't desolation, but something else entirely, a suspended animation. My relief, a sudden, potent warmth in my chest, was quickly chilled by an odd, pervasive silence. It wasn't the silence of an abandoned place, but a kind of waiting quiet, a breath held. Then a sound. Not a voice, not a dog barking, but a deep, resonant chime. It vibrated through the very air, rattling against my teeth, settling deep in my skull. It was a singular sound, not a melody, not a sequence, just one perfect, enormous chime. And then they appeared. From various doorways, with an unsettling synchronicity, people emerged. Not many, perhaps a dozen or so. They were dressed in drab, homespun clothes, gray, brown, deep forest green. Their movements were precise, eerily synchronized. One man, tall and gaunt, stepped out of what looked like a blacksmith's shop, carrying a hammer, his arm lifting and falling in a slow, steady arc, even though he wasn't near an anvil. Another, a woman with a severe bun, exited a small cottage, an empty basket hooked over her arm, her steps an exact mirror of the man's, even though their paths were diverging. They didn't acknowledge me. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from the exertion of my injuries, but from a burgeoning sense of unease. I tried to call out, my voice a raspy whisper after hours of disuse. "Hello? Can anyone help me?" No response. They continued their odd, silent ballet. I limped closer, my injured ankle screaming with every step, but a morbid fascination pulled me forward. The central plaza was dominated by a colossal clock tower, its face bare of numbers, its hands frozen at an arbitrary, yet somehow significant angle. It was from this tower that the rhythmic chime seemed to emanate, not a tick-tock, but that singular, deep resonance, repeating every minute, or perhaps every few minutes. I couldn't quite discern the pattern, only its relentless presence. As I watched, a group of 3 men, their faces expressionless, began to sweep the cobblestones in front of a building that might have been a communal hall. Their brooms moved in perfect unison, each stroke identical, each sweep ending at the exact same point before retracting. It was mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Their eyes, when they briefly met mine as I hobbled past, were flat, devoid of recognition or curiosity. They were like polished stones, reflecting light but revealing nothing. I found a bench outside what appeared to be an inn and collapsed onto it, every muscle aching, my head swimming. The air was perpetually overcast here,
the light flat and unchanging, casting no distinct shadows. There was a faint metallic scent on the wind, like old iron or damp gears. It wasn't unpleasant, but it added to the pervasive sense of wrongness. The rhythmic chime from the tower continued, a constant, low thrum beneath the silence. Each chime seemed to trigger a new phase in the townspeople's routine. At one chime, the sweeping men stopped abruptly, stood erect, and then, as if on an unheard cue, turned in unison and walked towards another building, their steps perfectly synchronized. A woman emerged from a bakery, carrying an imaginary loaf of bread, her movements stiff, almost robotic. She placed the bread on a non-existent counter, then arranged other phantom goods. Her fingers, I noticed, moved with a delicate precision, each joint bending at the same exact angle every time. There was no sound from them, no footsteps scuffing, no clothes rustling, no breath. It was as if their very presence absorbed sound, creating a vacuum around their movements. The only sound was that unyielding, resonant chime. I spent what felt like an eternity observing them, a cold dread seeping into my bones that had nothing to do with the temperature. They were performing tasks, yes, but they were tasks without purpose, without end. They were enacting a perpetual play, each actor perfectly hitting their mark, never deviating. It was the uncanny valley brought to horrifying life. Human forms, human actions, but a complete absence of human spark.
My thirst was becoming unbearable. I spotted a well in the center of the plaza. I pushed myself up, determined to get some water, despite the protesting shriek from my ankle. As I hobbled towards it, one of the men who had been sweeping, now standing motionless by a doorway, suddenly hitched. His right arm, which had been held stiffly at his side, twitched violently, jerking upwards, then down, as if pulled by an invisible string. His head snapped to the side, then back, a sharp, unnatural movement. It was like watching a marionette whose strings had momentarily tangled. A flicker, a brief shudder ran through the crowd. The woman at the bakery paused, her hand frozen mid-air, a subtle tremor running through her. The other two sweeping men stumbled, their synchronized posture breaking for a split second. Then the tower chimed again, a low, drawn-out chime, deeper, more insistent than before. And, just like that, they reset. The man's arm dropped, his head straightened. The woman resumed her phantom bread arranging. The other two men realigned themselves, their movements smooth and precise once more. It was as if the glitch had never happened, except I had seen it. I had witnessed the momentary fracturing of their perfect, horrifying order. A new, more chilling thought began to form in my mind, a tendril of ice spreading through my chest. The chiming of the clock tower wasn't just marking time, it was orchestrating them. It was the master conductor of this silent, mechanical symphony. I finally reached the well, my hands shaking as I cranked the rusted handle. The water was clear and cold, and I drank deeply, feeling some strength return. But with that strength came a heightened awareness of my predicament. I wasn't just lost, I was trapped in a nightmare. As dusk began to settle, a strange, muted deepening of the perpetual gray light, the townspeople began to move towards their respective dwellings. It wasn't a casual stroll home, it was a mass, synchronized retreat. They entered their houses at the exact same moment, the clack of their doors closing a single unified sound. I was left alone in the silent plaza, the only living, breathing, unprogrammed thing. The solitude should have been a relief, but it only amplified the terror. I was an anomaly, a rogue variable in their meticulously constructed world. Sleep didn't come easily. I huddled on the inn bench, my injured ankle throbbing, my mind racing.
Every distant chime from the tower sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I kept my eyes fixed on the inn door, expecting one of them to emerge, to attempt to correct me. The next morning, if you could call the unchanging gray light a morning, they emerged again. The same ritual, the same movements, but this time something was different.
I noticed subtle shifts. One man, instead of walking directly to the blacksmith's, took a half step to the left before correcting himself. Another woman, whose route was usually straight, veered slightly before resuming her perfect path. The glitches were more frequent, more pronounced, though still brief. And then I saw it. One of the men, the one who had been sweeping, was standing by the well. His eyes, those dull, blank eyes, were fixed on me. And for the first time, there was something in them. A faint, almost imperceptible flicker. A hint of recognition? Or perhaps an instruction. He lifted his arm, slowly, stiffly, and pointed towards the central clock tower. My blood ran cold. He wasn't pointing at the tower, he was pointing to it. The meaning slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't merely performing their tasks, they were waiting for something. And I, the anomaly, was disrupting their cycle. The glitches, I realized with a sickening lurch, weren't just random errors. They were reactions to my presence, to the unprogrammed chaos I represented. They were trying to integrate me, to fix me. A deep, resonating chime shook the very ground beneath me. It was louder, more insistent than any before, rattling every bone, vibrating in my chest. And as it faded, I heard a sound that was utterly out of place in this silent town, a sound I hadn't heard since I arrived. A faint click, a whirring, a distant metallic grind from within the clock tower. The man by the well took a step towards me. His movements were still stiff, but there was a new purpose in them, a horrifying, directed focus. The other townspeople, all of them, stopped their routines and turned towards me, their blank eyes now unified, fixed. I could feel it, a chilling pull, a magnetic force drawing me towards the tower. My injured ankle screamed, but it was nothing compared to the primal terror that now surged through me. They weren't trying to harm me, not in the way a wild animal would. They were trying to assimilate me, to make me one of them, to program my every move, my every thought, into their horrifying, perpetual, meaningless dance. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain, and ran. Not towards the edge of the valley, for I knew there was no escape that way, but towards the clock tower, towards the source of this nightmare. Perhaps, if I could reach it, if I could somehow understand it, I could break this cycle. Or perhaps I would simply become another gear in its terrible, ceaseless machination. The chimes grew louder, faster, closer. Each one was a command, a tick of an unseen clock counting down to my own horrific transformation. I could feel my muscles tightening, an unnatural stiffness creeping into my limbs. My breathing hitched, not from exertion, but from a growing, terrifying sense of something else taking control. The last thing I heard, before the final, deafening chime swallowed all sound, was the faintest whirring, not from the tower, but from deep within myself.